Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and welcome back to another trailer reaction, breakdown, review, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Yes, we knew way before the first film even came out this past summer that we were getting these back-to-back in a sense. They were only going to be, I think, like they tried to shoot for 28 days apart, but I think it's more like 30 or something, or 28 weeks or something. It's interesting, but I was really curious to see what the reception of this trailer was going to be. I am on board. I know you did an entire video on that first film, just breaking it down, talking about all the things you loved about it, and I know you're ready for it, but I was very curious to see how the broader public was going to receive this trailer, and I gotta say, I'm quite surprised so far. Seems like a lot more people are on board than I guess I thought there would be.
I know there was an article a couple weeks ago, Nia DaCosta had mentioned that when she had gotten the script from Alex Garland, really her only critique was, can we add more infected? And I know that was a big critique coming out of 28 years later. So I'm curious if maybe people are a little more hopeful to get what they expected from 28 years later. Maybe here in the Bone Temple, we'll get what people were looking for with that one that had just come out. But, you know, I was excited for this one. Like you said, I did that video. I have a big appreciation for 28 years later, and I was eagerly anticipating this one and to see what we're going to get with Jimmy, his gang, and Spike and Kelson. I mean, and they're all here. So it looks like they're taking some interesting turns.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, they're definitely really leaning into the Kelson stuff, it seems like, in this trailer a lot. I'm kind of hoping, just selfishly, that he takes a bit of center stage here, at least for a little while. It almost, to me, like, I don't know where you feel like that scene where he's walking up to the big the dangly boy, the one with
Samson?
the large schlong. Yeah, Samson, yes. Long Schlong McGee over there. I'm just gonna keep calling him dick names, but he I'm wondering if that takes place before the last one, or if this is just him revisiting Samson again and trying to make that connection with him, because like he was already so confident and not worried in the last one when he shot him with the darts, and he was already so comfortable around Samson that I was just like, I'm wondering if that's going to be like a pseudo flashback at the beginning where we get to see Kelson kind of looking at his photos of his family, kind of just maybe setting it, if not 24, maybe a week before or a couple weeks before the beginning of the first film.
And I think in that same article where Nia DaCosta had mentioned wanting to add more infected, I believe in that little excerpt, there's an article out there where she did mention that, like, kind of what story arcs we're going to be getting. Obviously, we're getting Jimmy and the gang and them wreaking havoc, and Spike joining them. But then I think she also mentioned that relationship. We're going to get an expansion on the relationship between Kelson and Samson. So I'm curious if they are going to do those flashbacks, kind of that inception of where he had first encountered him. And we don't know anything really about Samson other than he's an alpha. So who knows if we're going to get a flashback prior to him becoming infected, if we're going to get more connective tissue there. And, they have that throwaway line in 28 years later where they think that the infection has acted like a steroid. So I'm curious if we're going to get maybe an expansion on that to see how that all works, because, Alex Garland was so in this whole, we're really going to expand this lore and see how this infection really takes center stage and how it does affect each different infected in different ways. So I'm curious if we're going to get anything like that. Plus, Kelson, I love this little bunker that he's in, and we're kind of getting those little pictures that we're seeing from his previous life. And I know they have that train flashback. So just like we got in 28 years later, I'm curious if we're going to get something in terms of, we have that one train that they encountered the pregnant infected. And I'm curious if maybe where Kelson is set up with the Bone Temple, if that's no accident, if that's somewhere where even prior to everything, all hell breaking loose, if this was somewhere where he was familiar with.
It was meaningful to him. Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, like, I strongly still believe, I still haven't rewatched the film yet. I'm just waiting for it to either, I don't think it's on 4K yet, but it should be soon. And then just to drop in price somewhere, pop up somewhere. But it's one of those things where it's like, I'm really eager to rewatch that, because again, Kelson was my favorite part of the movie. I love Ralph Fiennes. I think that he's a wonderful actor. Obviously many do, but like, it's one of those things where I didn't go in there expecting him to steal the show for me and be such a sympathetic character. And I thought like the way that film subverted expectations, I know that's going to trigger tons of people when I say that, but like I loved what they did. I thought that it was nice to kind of say, hey, we're not just going to go the traditional, kind of stereotypical zombie Last of Us route here. We're going to kind of turn some things on its head, and maybe certain characters you expect to be bad guys aren't bad guys. And they've been doing that since the first film. And I think like this just gives me more hope that we're going to lean into more of the strengths. I could see some criticisms that people gave for the first movie, but I think with this trailer too, it does put that criticism there, or that at least that worry aside, that like, man, they are doing a lot of setup here. I can accept 28 years later for what it is and still love it, as long as this is all just telling Spike's story, and then we're going to be kind of like moving forward into what looks to be more of the big threat or the big arc that we're going to be following through this little trilogy. And it really looks like that's where we're going with the Jimmies and everything. I mean, you just see the dichotomy between what Kelson's out here doing and the science and the primitive science he's doing, and then just this group of cultists who are just wreaking havoc on what's left in the world.
Yeah, and I was mentioning that train sequence where it looks like a flashback, and I was thinking maybe that could be Kelson. That could be Kelson's flashback to the start of this, as we got Jimmy's at the very beginning, 28 years later, and then we're going to see him. So I really feel like this has the luxury of not having to lay so much groundwork in terms of building that foundation for Spike's story, because 28 years later was a way more sentimental film than I think anyone really had anticipated.
Oh, yeah.
So when we look at what we're going with Spike here, and he's part of Jimmy's gang, we can really just focus on, hey, we have a dog in this fight. We've connected with Spike to a certain extent in that first film, so we don't necessarily have to spend as much time laying any sort of groundwork for him, because we already feel for him. So if he's in this whole danger zone with the Jimmy gang and what exactly is going on, you do have more time to dedicate toward Kelson, his relationship with Samson, or getting his backstory. Because I assume some of these characters by the end of this trilogy are not going to make it out, and I can easily see
probably.
And my expectation is that we build even more of Kelson throughout this one. I don't think I don't anticipate him not making it out of the Bone Temple, but I could see him Spike all reteaming toward that final one, even having Jim come back, and having all these characters that we absolutely love, and then they all start dropping like flies once we have this perfect setup after the second film.
Yeah, I think personally, where you bring that up, and that's a really good point, because like I was sitting here thinking, like, I don't think Kelson's going to make it out of this one. I feel like that's going to be the hard lesson, because like in the first film, I think Spike's big lesson was to grow up and learn how to, what life is and what this life in this world is like, and how it's okay to let people go. It's okay to let things pass on. Your life doesn't end. But now I think that he has that freedom, and we've seen that at the end of the first film, where it's like, he's off doing his own thing. I think him having that freedom is going to be where he needs to learn more responsibility with it, and can't just openly trust people like he's trusting the Jimmies. It looks like at one point we see a shot of him with the blonde hair at the dinner table, and I had to pause it just to make sure. I'm like, is that Spike? And it's like, it is. So it's one of those things where it's like he's kind of, I think, gonna just hitch himself to this group, and unfortunately I think they're going to come across Kelson, and I think that's where things are going to go wrong, whether Spike points them in that direction and they go towards it thinking that hey, we can all work together, but that's not what it's going to be, or they're going to stumble across him and it's going to create a moral dilemma. I think that's where we're headed with this.
I think so as well, because you see the Bone Temple, which almost looks like, in certain shots, looks like it could be up in flames to us.
Oh, yeah.
At least what
The
I'm getting.
poster looks like it. Yeah, then the poster, he's like in front of it, he's screaming.
So, as we're theorizing here, I think, is where my brain had went when I had seen this, is that, they had mentioned that, Cillian Murphy's going to be in this in some capacity. I think
they said he's going to be in like the very last like few minutes. So they've been upfront about that, I think, because how this goes. We've seen it happen a million times where people are like, oh, this guy's in this movie, don't worry. And he's in there for 5 minutes. I think Luke Skywalker from The Force Awakens was the big one for people, where it's like that. So I think it's good they're getting out in front of that early.
And idea that, as soon as I had seen the trailer was that we see the Jimmies, Spike's clearly with them, some sort of issues. I think, isn't there's like a little scene in there where I think where um, Jimmy has a knife to Spike's mouth, maybe. I think that's Jimmy, but I don't know 100%. So you kind of feel some sort of tension. Then we have the female character that seems, I don't know, I don't know how you feel about it, but getting vibes that maybe she's not 100% down with whatever the gang is doing. So I'm curious if we're gonna get this kind of turn, and Spike is like, "What the hell did I get into?" And then as we see them, kind of, I guess, torturing people. It looks like some people. I don't know if they. Again, my thought is we see some characters running through the woods. I'm assuming they're from Holy Island. Is the only thing I can think of. Maybe just coming out to do what Spike had done in 28 Years Later, do some hunting. And they encounter the Jimmy gang. Maybe they know Spike, and that's where they end up going to Holy Island, is something where I could see. And that being kind of having all hell break loose on Holy Island. And as Nia DaCosta mentioned, more infected. I could easily see an infection going through Holy Island because we have a large group of people. So we kind of get what we wanted with the infected. And then I could see the Kelson and Bone Temple being burnt to the ground toward the end of the film.
Yes. Yeah.
And everything leading up to everything's broken. We're all beaten. Jim shows up, and we're going to be full-fledged, all of them against the Jimmy gang in that third one. And that's kind of where we built. Our good guys are totally broken by the end of this. I don't know. Maybe Spike's dad is dead. Who knows where we go with that with the Jimmy. So
I thought we saw him at first, but that's not him.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
not
just
him.
flipping through this, and I was just pausing scenes, and it's not. It looks like it's a totally different guy. We see another shot of him with that girl as they run up to that fence early on. So I think that's a flashback or has something to do with it. I think you're absolutely right about that girl character that we focus on with the Jimmy's haircut and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that she's like some kind of, I guess you'd call her a spy, or she's just kind of like in there just trying to get information, trying to figure out, what their deal is, and maybe trying to infiltrate somehow. Now, did you catch it minute 33? It looks like, and I this is Spike. Did you catch that it looks like Spike is aiming his bow through the gates of Holy Island towards whatever's like on that little bridge?
I just flipped through it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like and it looks like that's on fire as well.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm wondering if that's towards the end of the movie. Maybe, he goes back and the Jimmies follow him or something. I just think if you're doing a trilogy, we all know the way this structure works. The first film sets everything up. It gives you your character. You know who to root for, who the bad guys are, and all that. And then the second one turns everything on its head. It decides, okay, now your character is going to make some mistakes and you're going to suffer with them. So I agree with you. I don't know if Dad makes it out of this one. Aaron Taylor Johnson, I don't know if he's even slated for the third part. But I think that there's going to be some major consequences throughout this movie.
Yeah, because even when you go to a minute 23 in that trailer, it looks like a door with a bunch of people on fire coming out of there. So that looks like Holy Island to me. I don't know how you feel about it, but I could easily see there's another where Spike's sitting at a table, they're all eating, and that seems like Holy Island to me. So I'm curious if they set up shop to some extent there and just start wreaking havoc among everyone there, and then maybe the infection gets in, who knows. But I could see something like that going down, because I think they're going to really amp up the stakes to get to that third film. And I think this one is going to kind of give a lot of people what they wanted from 28 Years Later. It just feels like a little bit of a different vibe. And I know 28 Years Later had a wonderful trailer to it. That one, everyone was praising it, and, a little bit different than we expected. I think this one maybe doesn't have as much hype as 28 Years Later did with that trailer, but I think this is such a well-crafted trailer, and it kind of gives you a peek on the difference. I feel like a different vibe from this one than what we got with 28 Years Later. So
yeah, I was so concerned that they were just going to try to recreate the whole boots thing again. And like, there's a little bit of that with whatever this, I guess it sounds like it's some kind of a presentation or something. Just kind of like when we saw in the first movie where all the schools and the little videos and stuff, they were playing like the old tapes and things. I'm wondering if, this is, they're really hinting towards the fact that even though we've seen some evolutions of this virus, of these infected, it leaves you with that arm coming out of those bodies, right? And it
Yeah.
says something along the lines of like, oh, evolution is not complete, or something like that. Here, you give your thoughts. I'll listen to that real quick.
And I'm curious if we're going to see doing that video on 28 years later and Alex Garland talking about kind of the evolution, and you have the slow lows, you have the alphas in terms of what this infection has been doing over the past 28 years and how there are so many different variants out there, and especially looking at something like COVID and drawing parallels to that. I'm curious if we're going to get, I don't know, not necessarily an emotional like Samson character, but are we going to start getting hints like when we were in the train with 28 years later and we had the pregnant infected, and for that moment it felt she was more human than infected,
Oh
and
yeah.
then after the birthing, then she went right back to that rabidness of the infection. So I'm curious if like they said that this infection is acting like a steroid in a sense. Are we going to start kind of getting this going from just these rabid infected, and now we're outlasting this to kind of almost kind of like hit a reset button in terms of human evolution, where it's like, oh, now we're kind of circling back to, we're kind of getting cognitive abilities. Now I don't think we're going to get like he's going to be reading a book by the end of this or anything like that, but are we going to start getting some sort of emotion? I don't know how I feel about that. As we speak about it, I thought about it and I was like, I don't know if I'm necessarily on board. I'd have to see how that's presented, just because I'm not really looking for anything like that when it comes to the 28 weeks, years, days franchise. I like the idea of it acting as a steroid, just because it become more aggressive and what you get in terms of that threat. But I don't know how I feel about if we ended up getting more cognitive abilities from the infected.
I think, and I was listening to it as you were talking, and then I was listening to you as well, but like throughout the trailer, the voice is talking about how it's like, there will be a point when man doesn't use words to communicate at all. And then it starts talking about how there are still the line that I was looking for was it's broken up throughout the trailer, but it says with evolution there is still change to come. And so it's one of those things for me where it's like, I very much feel the way you're feeling, but I'm actually on the opposite side. I don't need him talking, but I like the idea of almost like, how you would think like with evolution and how humans work, and we had Neanderthals and things like that, where it's like, there's a hierarchy there where maybe the alpha, just due to the fact that it's, more imposing, more dangerous physically, but Kelson is, smarter. Maybe it's one of those things where it's like, he almost uses Kelson's, smarts and abilities to help him track down the baby. And because it's clear that's what he wants, that's what his instincts are pushing him towards. I'm very, very convinced that that's his kid. So it's like, I wonder if that's kind of what they're talking about, where they come to some kind of a almost primal understanding where it's like, I can use you, almost like what are those fish that dangle onto whales and sharks and stuff?
Oh, I
And
know what you're talking about. I
yeah,
don't know what they're called, but I know
he'll
exactly what you're talking about.
Kelson will basically be that for him, where it's
Yeah.
like he serves a purpose to help him get closer, but at the same time he could easily just say, all right, whatever, fuck you, I'm out of here, or I'll kill you, kind of thing. I think it's going to be something more like that. I do not see Alex Garland of all people writing a story where these infected start talking to each other like that.
Yeah.
If they do, it'll be very different. It'll almost be like they're building their own kind of grunts and like Gristle's kind of language.
I was a big fan of 28 years later in that evolutionary arc. I know a lot of people didn't really like it, but I think it was that next step, especially when you're jumping 28 years instead of, months. This is where we've been with this infection for a very long time. So of course we're going to start seeing variants and kind of coming out of that. What does the world look like in terms of these infected that have been sitting with it so long? But that could be the baby being at Holy Island. That could be easily how the infection reaches Holy Island. Maybe Samson does get there, and maybe Spike's already there. Who knows?
It
And
it
that's where
just
we
looks
meet.
like that's where everything has to go, right? Because
Yeah.
like you have these two plot lines, whether it's Samson and Dr. Kelson, and then you have Jimmy and Spike, and it just seems like you're going to have two forces almost converging on the island. And I think that would make for a really great movie, especially once those two groups cross paths, because then again, We're bringing in the moral conundrum and Spike's kind of battle, because at that point we don't know necessarily if because I saw that shot you were talking about with him and the knife. It certainly is Jimmy holding it to Spike's mouth. It seems way later in the movie, but like it's just one of those things where it's like I think that's where we're headed, where they are going to make Spike make choices, and they are going to be choices that Spike is not ready to make. Because again, in the first film, he wasn't ready to let his mom go. But Kelson and his mom had to teach him that no, this is better because I'm just going to do nothing but put you in danger. I'm going to do nothing but hold you back. And I love you. And as a parent, I think we can both sit here and say that, like, if we were in that situation where the mom was, where you have a terminal disease and it's like my son has a better chance surviving without me being dead weight to him, I think we'd all make that choice, because at the end of the day, you want nothing but to make sure that your kid has the best opportunities and is safe.
And that third act was so unexpected. We talk about it where
I love it.
really
It's so goddamn emotional.
it really subverted the expectation of what we were going to get with the film. And looking at this, like you said, the posters, Kelson, the Bone Temple looks like it's burning, all that stuff. It really does look like a centerpiece. Now, what if that happens way early on
I
than we
wouldn't be
expected?
surprised, because
And
like everything's on its head in these movies, man.
and like that's the catalyst where we see Kelson in his bunker. Maybe that's post Bone Temple burnt down, Jimmy encounter. He knows they're gonna go to Holy Island to get the baby, and then he's gonna track him down, and Samson follows. And then we all just end up there, and that's where all hell does break loose, and that's where Holy Island's burnt to the ground at the end of this film, and we don't know what the rest of it looks like. And that third act is just infected running around in Holy Island, and the Jimmy's wreaking havoc. That could be a rather interesting arc. I don't know really what to expect here. It does get you asking questions, get your brain going, which is it's a great trailer. That's why it
Oh
gets
yeah.
you excited to see what's going to happen. And what this was coming out in January, I think.
Yeah. So
Um,
we don't have long to wait. And
yeah,
it's not a showstopper like the first one's teaser trailer was, with that, boots, boots, boots thing. It's not the one everybody's going to be making TikToks with now from here on out. But it is a great trailer. Like you said, it sets the stage for, here are some pieces so you can see kind of where this is going and where we think the story might be headed. And again, I think it's going to be lots of consequences and lots of pain for Spike in this one, as to where, like, I would say there was pain in the first one for sure, but it was more, it was more of like, the pain of loss and the pain of just, I have to do this. This is what my mother wants. This is what's important. This is humane. As to where this one, I think it is just going to be inhumane pain. And that's what I'm ready for. And I'm definitely excited for this. Again, as we talk, we keep bringing up more things, because I want to mention this to you. Sometimes I do forget that it's only happening here on this part of the world. The rest of the world is moving on as normal. Everything else, like the infection never, went airborne or anything. We heard a lot about that in this first film when we had the Spec Ops team come in. And it's like, I wonder, like, if the Holy Island burns to the ground, is that what, the third film's going to be about? Is the rest of those people, whoever's still alive, being forced to go leave their little comforts and go out into the actual world and figure out what the hell to do next?
I think that could be really interesting. They did a great job setting up Holy Island. Now we only got really a glimpse of how that world works, but the opening before Spike leaves to go on his journey, it's a great setup. You really get the feel for how they've started living life again. You kind of get that, yeah, it's in the future, but they've resorted to using old ways because they don't have the tech there. And, with Eric showing up and having his cell phone and then throwing it away and kind of explaining, I could have been a delivery driver and you don't know what that is, or the internet, where we have the rest of the world just living their lives. And, we have Holy Island, and where the infected ground zero here is just like abandon all hope. So I could see Holy Island just completely burned to the ground, and them having to go to the mainland and, have to set up shop there and figure out what is life. But then another interesting part is, it looks like a lot of this Holy Island stuff is happening at night. We have that causeway where it's like sometimes you're not even gonna be able to get off the island. So
It traps everybody there. So I'm
yep.
wondering what that's going to do. That's a great point. Oh my God.
So, I mean, it looks like that could be a lot of great tension. I'm excited for this one. Yeah, it doesn't live up to the hype of like the initial 28 years later. I mean, we were so far removed from that franchise. I think that anticipation was so high for that. But this one, I think it's a great follow-up. You lost some of the audience with 28 years later just because of the story and difference in expectation. But I think this one could win a lot of people back. It seems like they're going to kind of get into that form of where 28 years later was this journey film for Spike and him kind of going through life and learning the meaning of life and death, where this one does seem like we're getting into the threats. We're getting into what we want out of these types of films. We've certainly planted a lot of seeds. There's a lot of intrigue here, a lot of great images that have you questioning what exactly is going to happen or where is this going to happen in the film. So I'm excited to see where Spike's going to be by the end of this one. If Kelson dies in this one, I will be in tears. But I'm hoping he makes it to the third one. It can set up a lot of great stuff for that third film.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love it too. But again, I just think like he's kind of his only friend past the people on Holy Island that we know of right now that are trustworthy. And I just don't see good people, unfortunately, in movies like this don't normally get the best thing that's coming to them.
I could see Spike's dad dying in this as an
Oh,
unexpected
absolutely. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson's gonna die. Yeah,
at
like
some point, but I could see him being the unexpected death, like no one even mentioning him, and then a third act he pops up and he's like dead. It's like, oh shit. I don't know.
Yeah, or Spike's gonna get back to Holy Island and his dad's just been out there looking for him and we don't see him at all. So it's like, we'll see. Because again, we got to remember, just because they show the cast on Google IMDb, there were plenty of people's faces that we didn't see, like the girl in this who we were just talking about. She was a part of the cast for the first one, but we only saw a handful of shots with her that were more references to kind of setting up the world and where we're at. So she's was not in the movie otherwise. So I think that there's definitely some room to play here. We might not see Aaron Taylor Johnson at all. So, I'm curious. I think this is definitely, like you said, a positive trailer. I think like the first film again sets everything up. Now this is where everything starts to deliver, hopefully, or at least starts to paint a broader picture. We now know how the game is played. Now we have to play the game. Is kind of what I'm looking at. So, yep, I'm ready for it. So I hope that this is going to go well. Again, I think they should just keep with what they did with the marketing of the last one. Keep the trailers very like sparse. This one's good, but like just give us maybe one more like in December. But don't overload us. Don't let this don't show me too much. I think you guys did a great job.
Scene or something like that. Nothing crazy, like 30 seconds or something like that. Just give us. We don't need much. We're already sold. But we're fans of 28 years later. So
yeah, and that's my fear is because like there were so many people who didn't like that they're going to overmarket this because they want to show people, hey, more infected, more of the stuff you guys were complaining about. So here we go. It's like, let's do it. I don't know. I'm not in their heads. I don't know what Sony's got planned, but all I know is I will be there in January sitting down watching 28 years later, and I imagine Luke and our wives will be with us because Haley, I sent her this trailer. For those of you if you're new here, that's my wife. She adored 28 years later, and she's texted me, I am so excited for this. And I'm just like, that's what I hope for. So
yep,
it's gonna be good.
I'm on board. I'm bringing a pack of hot dogs, because you always get the craving. So
oh geez, yeah, and I can't wait to see your follow-up to that too. That's gonna be great. Yeah, and I do want to put this out there. If 28 years, did this give us a date or is it just saying January?
I thought it was January 16th, maybe.
Oh, that sucks. I was gonna say my birthday is January 30th and it is on a Friday this year, so if you guys want to do me a solid, that'd be a great birthday present. Please drop that on my birthday, but I'm fine with it either way. At least I'm getting it that month. So
an early birthday present for you.
True. Very much. Hopefully this could be the one where it's like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. This is all going downhill. Lots of questions, lots of things up in the air, but let us know down below, guys. What do you think of the 28 years later Bone Temple trailer? If you weren't a fan of the first one, does this kind of bring you back a little bit? Are you still going to follow through with it, even if you didn't like the first? Or if you were like us and were a huge fan of the first, is this more exciting? Are you showing any signs of concern? Or are you just ready for this sequel to hit theaters and then just let the story take us? I am very curious to see what they're going to do next, and I hope we don't have to wait too long for that third one. I know they haven't shot it yet, so it will be a bit of a longer turnaround than this, but I'm hoping it's no more than maybe a year. So, like, that'd be great. Yeah,
especially if this one is met with a really positive reception. I can see that one easily in getting into production and get that one filmed and ready to go. So, You know, this one, my only concern was if they were going to go back and maybe alter some things because of how 28 years later was received. But it doesn't seem like they're doing any of that. They're just staying the course. So I'm certainly excited. Can't wait for that third one. I am ready for January, even though it's going to be freezing out. So
Absolutely. But alrighty, guys, it's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.